So hello and what's up guys, I'm back with another video, and in this video I'm just going to build a gaming PC which will cost you around 60 to 65,000, and you can run all AAA games at 1080p high settings, and you're going to achieve above 80 FPS in each and every games, and in some games such as GTA 5 and Assassin's Creed Valhalla you're going to get above 100 FPS with 1920 into 1080p ultra settings. So let's get started and let's just show you what component have I used in this PC build. So the first component which I used in this PC build is the processor. So we used an Intel gaming processor, and the processor is the Intel Core i5-9400F. Yes, it's a 6 processor, comes with a base frequency of 2.9 GHz and a total frequency of 4.2 GHz. It has a TDP of 65 watt, 9 MB of cache, and the manufacturing process of this processor is based on 14 nanometer. The processor doesn't have an integrated graphics, so if you want to display videos and play games, I think you should definitely go with discrete graphics. So I think that those are building a gaming PC which will cost you around 60 to 65,000. I think they should definitely go with a discrete graphics card. And speaking of the performance of this processor based Ryzen 5 2600X, 3500X, as well as 3600 and 3600X in terms of gaming, not multitasking. And it also beats Ryzen 7 1700 2700 in terms of games. Also, the unlocked Ryzen 7 processor 2700X and the 1700X, and the performance of in gaming of this processor is equivalent to the Ryzen 7 3700. And speaking of the price of this processor, you're going to get this processor around 13,000 to 13,500 in offline market, and in online market you're going to get this processor around 14,000 to 14,500. So I think a great processor at this price, just consider this processor. And the next component which we used in this PC build is the motherboard. The motherboard which we used in this PC build is the Gigabyte H310, and the model number is M.22.0. Why M.22.0? Because this motherboard comes with a M.2 slot. So if you want to pair a NVMe SSD or a M.2 NVMe SSD or normal M.2 SSD, you can just pair with this motherboard. And speaking of some features of this motherboard, you're going to get this motherboard supports Intel's 9th generation and 10th generation processor. The CPU socket is LGA1151. It comes with a gaming LAN, I think, which is great. And speaking of the price of this motherboard, you're going to get this motherboard around 5,000 to 5,500 in offline market. And speaking of online market, you're going to get this particular motherboard around 5,500 to 6,000, or maybe in some places 6,500. So I think you should consider this motherboard at this price. And speaking of the next component which we used in this PC build is the RAM. So we go with the Crucial 8GB DDR4 2666 MHz RAM, because the processor as well as the motherboard doesn't support more than 2666 of MHz of RAM. So I think this RAM is more than sufficient, and as well as this RAM is more than enough. And speaking of the price of this RAM, you're going to get this RAM around 2600 to 3000 in offline market. And speaking of online price of this RAM, you're going to get this RAM around 3200 to 3500. Remember, this RAM doesn't comes with a heatsink. This is a normal RAM. And speaking of the next component which we used in this PC build is the main component. As you know, the main part of a gaming PC, yes, the graphics card. So as you guys know that this time the price of the graphics card are really going high. So by keeping that thing in mind, when we used these GeForce GTX 1050 Ti is the MSI GeForce GTX 1050 Ti. It's an OC edition, as well as it supports DirectX 12, as well as it is a dual fan edition. You can see that the graphics card comes with a memory of 4GB GDDR5. So I think a great graphics card. And speaking of the price of this graphics card, as you guys know that the graphics card prices are really going high at this time. And so speaking of the price of this graphics card, you are going to get this graphics card for 16,000 to 17,000 in offline market. And speaking of online price, yesterday just I checked in Amazon, and they are saying that this graphics card is available for 18,500. So I think at this price nowadays, I think you should consider this graphics card, because this graphics card beats the RX 570 in maximum number of games. So yeah, you should definitely go with this graphics card at this price. And speaking of some features of this graphics card, as you guys know, it is an OC edition graphics card. Remember, if you just want to overclock this graphics card, you're going to use a B360 motherboard. Remember, this motherboard doesn't support any overclocking. This motherboard is a non-overclockable motherboard. If you want to overclock this graphics card, you're going to definitely need a B360 or B365 motherboard. So I just don't think that you need to overclock, but if you just want overclock, I think you should definitely go with a B365 or B360 chipset. And speaking of the storage, the primary storage in which we are going to use install Windows and some games and some softwares, we used the Kingston A2000 250 GB M.2 NVMe SSD. Yes, the Kingston is a very good brand, as you guys know, and it comes with 5-year warranty. And yesterday I just installed Windows 10 in this SSD, and it just take only 7 minutes to install Windows 10 with all setup, and till home screen it just take only 6 minutes to 7 minutes. So I think a great SSD at this price. I think you should definitely consider at this SSD at this price. And speaking of the price of this SSD, you're going to get this SSD around 4,000 to 4,500 in offline market. And speaking of online price of this brand, you're going to get this brand around 4,500 to 5,000. So I think you should definitely consider this SSD. And speaking of the next component which we used for the secondary storage, we used the 1TB WD 1TB blue hard disk. Yes, and speaking of the price of this hard disk, you're going to get this hard disk around 3,200 to 3,500 in offline market. And speaking of online price of this hard disk, you're going to get this hard disk around 3,500 to 4,000. So I think consider this hard disk at this price. And speaking of the PSU, what we use in this build is this Gigabyte P450B PSU. Yes, it's a P450B Gigabyte PSU, which is also a 80 plus bronze PSU, a 450 watt PSU. And speaking of the price of this PSU, you're going to get this PSU around 3,500 to 4,000 in offline market. And speaking of online price of this PSU, we're going to get this PSU around 4,500 to 5,000 in online market. So I think a great PSU at this price. You just don't need a 550 or 650 or 750 watt PSU at this price. So yeah, just consider this PSU. I think it is more than enough at this type of PC builds. 450 watt is more than enough in this type of PC builds. So as you guys know that this PSU, you're going to get this PSU around 4,000 to 4,500. So I think that you should consider this PSU at this price. And speaking of the last and the final component of our gaming PC build is this gaming cabinet. You're going to get this gaming cabinet, and speaking of the name of the brand is Antec. You know that Antec is a very superior brand in terms of gaming cabinets. And speaking of the model number, this is the Antec NX130. Yes, it's the Antec NX130. Not very cheap, but the cooling system of this PSU I think is great, because it comes with a mesh in front, one to 3.0 USB in front, as well as two 2.0 USB slots in front, and it comes with one mic jacks, one headphone jacks, and one power reset, as well as one power button. And it also comes with a PSU shroud as well as a transparent side panel. It also comes with a 120 mm fan in back, and it does support 240 mm both two fans in front. Then remember, this cabinet comes with only one 120 mm fan in rear. If you want to pair a 240 mm or 120 mm RGB or non-RGB or LED fans, you can just pair the two RGB 120 mm fan in front or two RGB 240 mm fan in front. And speaking of the price of this cabinet, you're going to get this cabinet around 3,000 to 3,500 in offline market. And speaking of online price of this cabinet, you're going to get this cabinet around 3,500 to 4,000. So I think a great cabinet at this price, and the final price of our PC is only 64,500, which is almost 65,000. So I think you should definitely go with this PC build. So I will just going to show you. I'm just going to show you the final look of my gaming PC. Yes, this is the final look of this gaming PC. So obviously, last but not least, if you like my video, just give a big thumbs up, and if you all just click on the subscribe button, and obviously click on the bell notification icon for the latest update. So till then, stay home, stay safe, goodbye.